Hey friends and family, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com and today's video will be a mix for my subscribers as well as for my descendants. And I say that because I will be talking about another one of my relatives. I've been thinking about my mother's father, my maternal grandfather, quite a bit. He was, without doubt, my favorite grandparent. Now, I did know his wife, my grandmother, but from the earliest age that I can remember her, and I was probably about 5 years old when she came to our house for a little visit. And there was an incident where my mother had just set the table for breakfast, and we were going to have breakfast at the kitchen table. And my grandmother cleared the dishes up, and my mother no sooner laid the table than my grandmother cleared it up. So she was confused. And then there was another incident really early on where my mom said, "You want to call grandmom and, say hi, grandmom and pop, like kids do, right?" My grandchildren do that too. And I went to call her, and I knew it was her because I recognized her voice. And she said really mean things, and I don't think it was because she had a moment of clarity. She obviously didn't. She was she answered the phone, so it wasn't that my grandfather answered the phone. He held it from us. I don't think he let us know what was happening with her. And then eventually she just went into full, Now, in those days, they didn't call it Alzheimer's because I don't think they tested for it at that stage. So we just said she was senile, just like with my brother's autism. They never said he was autistic. They labeled him as MR. We know what that's supposed to mean because in those days there were not, and they didn't really know the proper term or what was really happening with individuals. So at any rate, so they said she was senile, but at the earliest stages, like what I'm referencing here, she didn't know who I was, and I gave the phone to my mother and I said, "Grandma called me a bitch." And my mother was like, "What?" And she got on the phone, and I don't really remember what my mother said in particular. I just know that my mother was really upset, and when she got off the phone, she said that wasn't grandmom, that was another lady. So I don't know if she was trying to spare me, that maybe we got a wrong number. I think my mother told me it was a wrong number and that it wasn't my grandmother. And maybe. And my grandmother was sweet, She was definitely senile for sure, but she was the kind of person who never was mean. So I don't know, maybe that was a wrong number, but I just remember it as a child. I was probably just 5 or 6 years old, and she would look in the mirror and talk to herself and then talk in Italian. And my mother, when she watched her do that, she observed that she was talking to her brothers and her cousins, and she was in another place. So she must have been happy, but she was gone. But my grandfather, gosh, he was such an incredible man. He adored her. And he took care of her. He took really good care of her. In fact, I think that was his reason for living. He went through 2 rounds of cancer, throat, esophageal cancer. He had one of those voice boxes, and he went through it twice. And he had to stay alive because he had to take care of Elizabeth, because he felt like people would probably put her away because nobody could really take care of her. And he stayed alive, and after she died, he died 6 months later. Ultimately, she died from a brain aneurysm, which I think is very interesting because my sister and I both got that. But we fortunately were able to get ours corrected. Well, actually, my sister didn't. My sister's blue. My sister had 3 blow at once. And then she had 4 remaining that were corrected. And then she recently had a second cranial surgery. Whew, I can't imagine. And they went in and corrected the last one that was a threat to her. And now they say she should be good for the rest of her life. And mine, knock wood, was corrected. I only had 1. I go back next year in 2026 to see how it's going. So any of you who are descendants, you need to go get your brain scanned to make sure, because apparently it runs in the family, apparently. At any rate, so he was such a good man. He just took care of her, and it could not have been easy. It wasn't easy. And in all of that, he continued until the day he died. He continued to work as an architect. I mean, he died, I think it was like, I don't think he was quite 80. He was in his late 70s. But every single time I ever saw my grandfather, he was working with other architects. Now, he had been a very highly regarded architect in Philadelphia in his day. And as I've mentioned in other videos, I was really fiercely proud of the fact that he was one of the young people involved in the construction of the Philadelphia Art Museum in 1929. Now that's when the stock market crashed, and so there were setbacks for sure. But then they continued it. It's a wonderful museum. If you've ever gone to the city of Philadelphia, that's one place that you'd love to. I think you would love to visit, because it's a beautiful museum, and And I was a docent there. I was drawn to it knowing that my grandfather had something to do with it. At any rate, he continued to be an architect. Long after he retired, he was still giving jobs. He was still being given jobs from active architects, And my first job I ever had was nepotism for sure. My granddaughter wants to work. She's smart. She's a good person. She's like reliable. You can count on her. Do you got anything in your office? And he called everybody until somebody said, we got a job. She can have it. And that architecture firm was Davis, Poole, and Sloan Associates. I don't know if they're still in business or if they've gone under another. Well, they're all dead, I'm sure. I don't know if any of their descendants continued with it or not, but they were good people and they treated me great. And I worked my butt off. I did everything they asked of me, and they were pleased with me, and they had me come back every year. And even after I graduated college, I went back to them to visit. And they were thrilled to see me, and they made such a fuss, and I was thrilled to see them. And I even think I brought back one of my after I got married and had children. I brought back my eldest child for them to see. So it was a very good experience. It wasn't just it wasn't just like they got me a job and that was the end of it. They meant a lot to me, and they always treated me great. At any rate, I get off on these tangents sometimes, but he was a kind man. I mean, sometimes he would babysit, if my parents wanted to go out or something, and he said, I'll take care. I'll watch the kids. Of course, he'd have to get somebody to watch my grandmother when he did that. So maybe one of my, I don't know who would have gone in to watch my grandmother. I don't remember her coming with him. But he must have gotten somebody temporarily to take care of her so he could watch us. And I remember being the eldest, sitting on his lap. The other kids went to bed. He kept me up. He liked me. I think I was his favorite. And I remember him telling me a story. And there was a spider on the wall. In those days, 3 sides of our house was in the woods, and the other side, 2 sides were facing the woods. One side faced the street, and the other side faced a neighbor. The side neighbor. So we had a lot of spiders. And there was a spider on the wall. As he was reading me a story, there was a spider on the wall, and I freaked out because I was terrified of spiders as a result of seeing so many. You'd think I'd have become, you would have thought that I would have been immune to them, but I wasn't. And he turned the story, whatever he was reading in the book, because I was too small to know the difference, I guess, he turned it into a story about a spider and how you shouldn't be afraid of spiders, and how the spider was, the hero of the story, and I'll never forget that. Of course, I was still deathly scared of spiders, but I remembered his effort there. And as I mentioned, he had esophageal cancer, so he had to have one of those speech boxes that he had to put to his throat, which meant, of course, that he had a hole in his throat. But he was so stylish and debonair, man. He would wear ascots around his neck. So that's like he, just wore these, scarves around his neck. And he, if anybody could work that thing, he did. And as a matter of fact, the deck I'm going to be using today is one of his scarves that he wore around his neck. And I have a few scarves and a few items that belong to him. And every time I see them, of course, and every time I touch them, I remember how much I love him. He was just a wonderful man, and he was political. He was an FDR man, FDR through and through, and that's probably what influenced me the most as a young person when I was going to vote. He was like, well, you're going to vote, you're going to register Democrat. Don't listen to your father. He's a Republican. True story. And I was like, I trusted my grandpa. I trusted him, And so I registered as Democrat, and I've been a Democrat my entire life, and I've never voted anything except Democrat as an ode to him. Not just as an ode to him. I mean, I'm a critical thinker myself, but that's what got me started. And how important it was to take care of people, and he would take care of people. He paid for people to come in. He did pay for people to come in and take care of my grandmom when he was working, because she would get into mischief, and he would just have somebody present with him. And the one that I remember was a gentleman named Leonard, and he was a good man. But he was a poor man, and he was definitely on assisted living. So my grandfather, he was given assistance because he was so poor. But the money was so terrible that my grandfather insisted on paying him what anybody else would have charged him. But he paid him under the table so that he could get a little bit ahead. And Leonard stayed with my grandfather, I think, until Leonard died, working for him. I mean, he went home, he didn't live with my grandparents, but he put in a long day. And so, at any rate, my grandpa was a good, kind, generous man. He'd give out lots of candy at Halloween, and when the candy ran out, he'd give them quarters. In the 60s and 70s, a quarter was a lot of money, so he was just an amazing person. And I want to put that out there, that he was exceptional. And because I know I spoke on a great deal of Josepha, who was a person I never met, but I wanted to give my grandpa a shout out, because he was really one of my most favorite people I've ever known was my grandpa. So, any rate, I was going through my decks to say, what am I going to do today? And I saw this, and because I had been thinking of my grandpa so much, I thought, I got to pull out that deck. Now, I think it's really interesting that the man I described, right, who was a wonderful, generous, kind man, why on earth would I use his scarf, his ascot? Right, this was like what he put around his neck. Why would I use his scarf, or you know what, sometimes he tucked it in his collar too, you know, so that his shirt collar, as a, you know, so you wouldn't see his whole. Why would I use this deck? Why would I use it to cover this deck? Because some people, I'm sure, would describe this deck as a bit of a sinister deck. And it's the Fergus Hall Witches Tarot. And I have done several videos on this, and I have compared it to the 007 tarot deck, which came out in 1973. It's, you know, it's like 52 or 3 years old now. And I just did a side-by-side comparison. These colors are a little, let me see how they compare. The colors are a little different. The blues are, now this is the 007, and then this is the Fergus Hall one that I think I got in like 75 or 76, something like that. Excuse me. And you'll notice that the purples are more, the blues rather, are a little more purple. And then this is a little bit more cerulean. And some other colors are different too. Like here's the brown background. And the 007, it's more of a rust brown, where this has more of like an olive tint to it. You may not be able to see it so well. And maybe I'll show one more just to see. Well, I guess that's that. There's none up that are, oh, okay. Here we have what they call the Hierophant. And here's the 007, and here's the, when they rebranded it, they called it the Fergus Hall Tarot of the Witches. So you see this is more of a bright green, where this is more of a blue-green. So there are, whenever they reformulate a deck, they always do change it a little bit. I got to make sure I got all the right cards in the right piles. Ooh. I got to take my time to fix that. Otherwise, it'll be wrong, and then I'll never figure out what I did. Okay, so let me go off camera and decide what I'm going to do. What kind of reading am I going to do with this great deck? I love this deck. It's one of my, I know Masha recently did a 11 Tarot Crushes, current, like, I forget what the thing is called, but I'll include her tag down below for any of you who enjoy doing tarot, for any of you who enjoy doing tarot challenges, you know. I don't think I'm going to do this particular one, only because I really don't have 11 tarot crushes currently, you know. I usually will have 3 or 4 tarot crushes that I consistently use for the long haul. You know, once I get exposed to something like my recent crush is obviously the Fortuna Opal Omen. But that's a crush right now, but it will be one of the ones that I regularly will use, as is this one. I have a few, but I don't have 11. I'd have to force it to come up with 11, which is why I'm not going to do the tag. I was thinking of doing my own tag, like my tarot crushes, but I don't really want to take away from Masha. You know, I don't really want to do that to her. So, but this is one of my long-term tarot crushes for sure. And I don't know, I guess he wasn't like a witchy kind of person. But I guess because I love the deck, I just used his scarf. You know, another thing is back in the 70s, when we first, you know, when tarot hit the scene in the United States in a big way, you know, we got all kinds of, oh, you got to get rid of the box, put it in, wrap it in something, you know, wrap it in silk, which this is silk, you know, wrap it in silk, or put it, in those days, they didn't even say put it in a pouch. I know a lot of people now, the younger folks, put them in pouches, and I have a few in pouches. But for the most part, it was get rid of the box, wrap it in silk. So that's what I did, and my favorite silk was this, so I put it in silk. And it's been wrapped in my grandfather's silk scarf ever since I got it. So this was a deck that was in order. So I want to, well, I always shuffle my decks. Always shuffle my decks 11 times, riffle shuffle. And then I'll do 21 overhand shuffles. And that's how I mix my decks, always. But particularly because this was in order, I particularly want to make sure I give it really good shuffles. So let me go off camera, finish it, go into my meditative place to come up with a really good question, not to waste a question. And I'll be right back. Oh, and the one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention, if this video prompts you to try to find a 50-year-old deck from when this, released in 1973, you've got to get the blue back. The blue back is the only authentic back from 1973. The red back was a commemorative deck that they put out, maybe 20 years, 25 years. I don't know what the occasion was, but they put out a commemorative deck to distinguish it from the first one so they would know that it was different. They gave it red backs. But if you're looking for the authentic 1973 copy, it's got to have the blue back. Just thought I'd mention that to you. Oh, and the other thing, I did mention that my grandfather said, don't listen to your father, he's a registered Republican, which my father was a conservative man. However, I know for a fact that he voted for Kennedy, and I know for a fact that he was appalled by Nixon. So he was a thinking man. I don't know why he was a registered conservative. I guess he was just a conservative person. But he did vote Democrat when he saw that it was the right thing to do. So I give him the benefit of the doubt to believe if he were here that he would never have been a you-know-what follower. I believe in my heart that would never happen. And if it were to, the rest of us would have given him 4 flat tires and not let him leave the house. No, we wouldn't do such a thing. We wouldn't do such a thing. But we would have done our best to discourage him from doing that. But I don't think we would have had to, because my father was a very intelligent person. And anyway.
Alrighty. I thought I asked the universe to, if possible, to tap me in to the essence of my grandfather, or if my grandfather is no longer available. Although I dream about my grandfather, probably at least once a year I'll have a dream where I'm walking on one side of the street and he's walking on another, and we see each other and we wave, but he goes on his way and I go on my way, but we stop and connect. So we've never come back to where I'm sitting on his knee or anything like that in my dreams, but we see each other from afar. It's always the case where I see him from afar, and we acknowledge one another, but he's doing something else, and then I go on my own way too. But I still feel there's a forever thread with my ancestors, and I definitely feel there's a forever thread with him. So I thought, since I've been talking about him, why not do a reading? What would his advice be to me right now if I were able to be in his presence? What would his advice be to me to get through this, or what to do? Now, I've been attending town halls, and you don't have to go in person. Our town hall is 2 hours away for Trenton, which is the state capital, but I've been attending them virtually, online. And I even submitted questions to ask my representative. And it's easy to do, And when they have a town hall, they contact me. If they say join in the call or join us online, and you can either ask the question on the phone in real time, or you could type in your question and listen to the town hall, and then when your question comes up, they answer it. So I've been doing that a lot. I've been trying to stay as involved as possible, And as you guys probably already realized, but at any rate. Okay, Grandpa. I called him Pop Pop. Okay, Pop Pop. If you could, I asked the universe to just, give me the essence of what he would say if he's no longer available to, talk to me right now. But, card actually flipped over. Seven Swords. Fight. Okay. Anyway, let's do a proper reading. Well, he was very fair-minded, and he would most certainly instruct me to fight for what's right. There's no question about it. No question about it. Now, how I see the suit of batons, the people in the suit of batons. I see the queen of, like, for example, when I taught myself, and I have, it's in my, I have about 6 or 7 videos for learning tarot. It's paid, you have to pay for it, but in my lessons, I give my idea for how to come up with, one of the lessons is on how to identify and never have any confusion about who the court cards are. And I think probably most of the people who take the course, one of the things they say is how wonderful that segment was on learning the court cards. But at any rate, I see the suit of batons as, especially the king, as somebody who has a past that he could have overcome, but it was a shady past or a slippery past nonetheless. So we'll see what comes next. I don't know if this is referencing you-know-who, like what his opinion is of you-know-who, but we'll see. So we have justice, possible you-know-who. Oh, gosh. Yeah, well, he would have called him out, that's for sure. Oh, Pop, I know you're here, man. I know you're here because I hear you. Okay, so we have, and in this deck, unfortunately, justice. Oh, no, justice is 8. Okay, they didn't. That's why I love this deck so much, because they didn't change justice to 11. Justice is 8. That's right. 8 and 15. We have 23, which minus 22 will give us 1, which is the magician. Let me pull it. And in recent videos, I've been sharing that I've been coming to see an aspect of the magician as having a malevolent power, right? And wow, this is incredible. So there's no doubt in my mind that my Pop would have called this monster out as having being a malignant, wicked power. He's got to be brought to justice. We got to do what we got to do. I mean, I asked now specifically what his words of wisdom would be to me. And his words of wisdom to me is not necessarily what to do so much as a verification that I'm on the right track, I don't know if this is hopeful in that he will be brought to justice. Maybe it's a little bit of hope, but I don't know. I think it's more like she's on a mission and she's got to do whatever it is that she can do to kill the snake, Not kill the snake. I don't mean that in a literal way. I mean in a figurative way to, and she isn't slaying the snake actually, is she? She's just controlling it, or she's suppressing it, or she's stopping it at its head. The head doesn't have much flexibility there. So I think it's just his way of saying, do what you can to stop the venom, stop the venomous poison that he's spewing. So do what you can to speak out on it. And I do think this is him. Now, I don't read reversals. In the universe, you know, I don't ever put cards upside down. If a card is accidentally in reverse, I'll take note that it comes out that way, and maybe I'll give it a little more attention. But, you know, I never put cards in reverse in my decks. So have you ever seen a card come out in reverse? Hardly ever in my videos, I mean. So I do think that this is the well, obviously, I think it's the dark side of you-know-who, because these are the cards that came out. So I think he's verifying that I'm on the right track and that I recognize him for who he is, the one whose name I shall not mention, and that this is either a word of hope or a word of encouragement to continue doing, having a voice. Oh boy. Thank you, Pop Pop. Thank you, Pop Pop. I like to do, it's already 30 minutes, so I'm going to call it a day. Thank you for being here. If you find value in my videos, please give it a thumbs up. Please like my channel. Please subscribe to my channel. And it really helps out. Oh, that one didn't turn out so good. I got the camera in between my hands and the deck, so it's harder for me to shuffle like that. At any rate, until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind.